My name is Guillermo Melantoni, and I'm here with Marion Landry, and we'll talk about AEC workflows for Autodesk Design Suite. My role within Autodesk, I'm a product manager for user interaction and interoperability for suites, and I'll let Marion introduce her now.
Hi, I'm Marion Landry, and I'm the technical marketing specialist for 3ds Max Design as well as Showcase. So today we're going to have a look at the AEC workflow for the Autodesk Design Suite, and we're going to cover 4 different software that are included in the Autodesk Design Suite Premium, which is AutoCAD, 3ds Max Design, Showcase, and Alias Sketch. So we're going to start in Alias Sketch, creating vector sketching. Then we're going to migrate to AutoCAD to do conceptual design using surface modeling. From AutoCAD, we're going to have a look at the model in real time and create interactive presentation using Showcase. And then we're going to go back to AutoCAD and refine the model even more. Then we're going to bring the model in 3ds Max Design, where we'll validate the design with the light analysis using exposure technology. And then going back to AutoCAD and work a little bit more on the model as well. And then we're going to go and use the file linking workflow and have a look at this model in 3ds Max Design and start working on the visualization. Once the visualization is finished, we're going to send the final rendering to Alias Sketch and create a photo montage. So I'm going to pass on to Guillermo, who's going to start with you with Alias Sketch.
Right. And by the way, this is the kind of workflow that we expect you guys to have when you're using our software. This is kind of a best practice. Just something we need to talk about. We're going to be using videos right now for the whole presentation, just so we can keep the timing and really talk about the most relevant stuff. So we'll go right now to the first part, which is basically talking about Alias Sketch for AutoCAD, which is right now called Sketchbook Designer. This was a change in branding in the middle of the year, but it's basically the same software with some new things. So what do we want to do now? We are starting with an aerial photograph that we'll put in AutoCAD. So we want to start making the design over some piece of information like this photograph. The first thing we have to do is to have that in scale. So in order to do that, and we don't know exactly what's the size of the photograph, we'll just add something like a line that we know should measure 6 meters, for example. So we are going to create another line on top of that actually measures 6 meters, and then make a scale of the photograph into that new scale. So basically use the scale command with reference. So we start from the first point into the second, and then the desired place. And now that photograph is exactly the size we want. Going into the paper space of AutoCAD, and we go into Sketchbook Designer or Alias Sketch, and we will make, first of all, a viewport in paper space. And now, from that, we'll create a canvas. A canvas in Alias Sketch is something like a viewport that is going to be baked, creating an image that can be afterwards used on some operations done in Sketchbook Designer. So what's happening now is AutoCAD is kind of making a plot in order to bake that image. And as you can see now, we have an underlay layer and then a paint layer. We're going to take that information now into Sketchbook Designer, which is the standalone application, which is not a plugin, the standalone application. And the nice thing about Sketchbook Designer is that we can work with vector layers. That means that any sketching we do with vector layers will become curves that can be used afterwards in AutoCAD. So basically, the thing what we want to do now is just sketch, make strokes. Can be done with a mouse, can be done with a tablet, right? And each of those strokes are not bitmaps, right? Those strokes are real curves. And as you can see now, right, after we finish, we can tweak those things. So there are specific tools to grab the whole curve and just move it around because we have control over all the control vertices. There's this little icon there that lets us cycle through different options of different curves that will all share those 3 points. It could be a spline, it could be an arc, and it could be a segment. And we can do that with each of those, right? So this is exactly what I'm doing right now. Just going through, cycling all of these things. Sometimes, I mean, your pulse when you're sketching may not be exactly perfect, so this is a great way to just work around that and have a very accurate thing. So basically, it's just going around through all of the things, see how easy it is to just adjust and recreate anything. But now you may also want to check out, I mean, all the overhangs. So there's another tool that lets us grab different parts of those segments when they are intersecting something, and you can just take them out. And you can also just take any tails of any segments, like I'm doing right now, and basically, all what you hear is my first initial sketching, that one that you normally do in a napkin, right? We are now doing it in a real interface in which now I'm just creating vectors in AutoCAD. I am saving that as AutoCAD 2010, so I get all the splines that I need. And now I'll take that information back into AutoCAD. So there's a little button here that says return, in which we go from the standalone Sketchbook Designer into the plugin Sketchbook Designer or Alias Sketch for AutoCAD. At the same time, I'll be opening the vectors that I just made in Sketchbook Designer. As you can see, these are real curves in AutoCAD. What we don't know really is the scale of this, right? So we can trim them, we can do some work on top of them, so we can make it better. So I just showed that we can trim it either in Sketchbook Designer or in AutoCAD. That doesn't matter, right? And now I'm going to copy and paste this information into this file. And of course, the scale is not there, right? Because it's the environment is not scalar. So now I'm going to take that information into the right place, and I'm going to use the same procedure I used for scaling the photograph. In this case, I'm going to scale the vectors according to the photograph with reference. So very simple way to get everything on track. Now I'll just make something for reference. For example, I know that that's a circle, so I get that information, and I take all that into paper space. Remember that paper space and model space in AutoCAD are completely different environments with different scales, so this is a step that looks a little annoying, but it's something we have to do. And once we have this information here, we'll do again the same thing. We'll scale this circle because we know exactly the size, and we will get the curves in the place where we want them, which is what we just sketched. Remember and imagine that all these things, you used to do that in a napkin, in a piece of paper, then you may have sometimes scanned that information, then just put it as a background, but right now we are having the chance to really work on those curves. So now that we do that, we'll go into AutoCAD. Actually, we are already in AutoCAD, but what we're going to do now is basically go into the environment for surface modeling. So this is new features in AutoCAD 2011. We have a whole interface for surface modeling in which what we're going to do now is, for example, in this case, I already copied the splines and I made some modifications. But one important thing in surface modeling is understand how much we have evolved on spline handling in AutoCAD. Right now, everything is through direct manipulation. That means that once you hover over any of the points, any of the grips in the spline, you will see that you can have a lot of interesting features. For example, if I select this spline that has a lot of control vertices, right, I can go into hover into one of those control vertices and just remove fit points, for example. So what we're doing by removing fit points is having less objects and less, we can have a better handling of the spline. Depending on what we want, we have more detail, less detail. In this case, I'm just going to rebuild the whole spline to have, instead of 13 points, to just have a 5, and we are going to basically just keep editing this. One thing we can do is to basically just grab any of these points and move them around. And the other thing is how we're going to model. There are two basic toggles. They are called surface sensitivity and NURBS creation. Surface sensitivity will ensure that whatever we do on surfaces in AutoCAD, in this case this loft, is going to be associative. That means that if we move the splines that created that thing, everything is going to move with it. We could also have used NURBS, and that is something very different, which we'll explain later in the process. So right now what I'm doing is just I'm selecting each of the curves in order to create surfaces. And another very interesting thing in AutoCAD 2011 is that our surfaces are what we call explicit surfaces. So if you select a surface, it's going to be, for example, a loft. And if it is a loft, it keeps the properties of the loft. So anytime you want to edit, you're not dealing with NURBS, which don't have any kind of properties apart from the amount of U's and V's on the grid. So as you can see, I'm doing very fast. I'm just going through all the curves and creating the sides of this pavilion in this case. Right? And once I have all this information, I may proceed to a next step, because for sure I want a roof for this. I want to cover all these two bodies, right? And I can do this in many different ways. You could also use visual styles, for example. I really recommend using the X-ray, which is somehow something that lets you see the objects, but it also lets you see the isolines. So in this case, creating a patch. The patch, since it's created through surface edges, you could define continuity, but in this case I just wanted flat, so I'll go to G0. G0, G1, and G2 are the continuities that AutoCAD accepts. And I could also have worked with the network surface. For example, in this case, I'm just grabbing these surface edges, and as you can see, when in AutoCAD 2011, when I grab any place in which there are many elements coexisting, I have selection cycling to go through it. So there I go. I have my two bodies here, and I'm ready to keep modeling, keep working on it. What kind of stuff could I do with this? I may need to, for example, make some edits. And as I said before, you may want to grab these splines and, for example, just move them. And as you can see, once I'm moving the geometry, everything updates. So no need to do undo, no need to go back and do things many times. And this is very, very, very important for a real workflow in conceptual design, because conceptual design basically means having this power to just do whatever you want and iterate on the whole process. So now what I'm going to do is I want a skylight that we're going to see afterwards, because we need more light on this place. So I'm going to project splines on top of that roof. So once I get the real splines, you will see that the splines are projected into the roof, and now I'm going to trim it. So trimming is a very interesting operation because it keeps surface sensitivity. You may also find in some other surface modeling applications in which at that part the history is broken. So right now, if I select that surface and those two splines and I click on the interior space, this is what I got. I got the trimming of the surfaces, and everything is getting ready to be used afterwards in the rest of the conceptual design. Another thing I want to do now is separate the side into a slab of concrete. So I'm going to use a tool that's actually on the solid tab, but it's basically used for both surface modeling and solid modeling, in which I'm going to slice that part based on that point, and I'm going to do the same to the second part. All this will have more sense when you see the whole workflow, but basically what I'm creating is a slab which is continuous concrete going through the side into the top and back into the side, and the rest is going to be glass. So there I go, very fast. In a couple of minutes, I could have from a basic sketch all this information. Another thing I want to do is make an offset, because I need depth, right? I need to have some thickness there, so then we as architects, in this case, we can understand what we're doing. So what I'm going to do now is just, again, create a little offset of the surface, for example, in this case, 40 centimeters, right? And we have what we call direct manipulation, which means since this is understood as an offset surface, it has controls that let us just go back and forth and keep changing things at any time of the process. Now I'm going to do another offset of this slab, again, 40 centimeters, and I'm basically going to repeat the same operation at the back. I just ask you to remember how much time you spent on these things before we had these features, right? You may have spent pretty much the whole day just trying to figure out how to do this. And now we want to join them, so we'll use a blend. And the blend is a third surface between two surface edges that, again, adjusts continuity. In this case, we want perfect continuity, perfect curvature, so we are in G2. And we're almost ready to go into the next step, would be, okay, I'm seeing a lot of wireframes here, but I probably want to communicate an idea with the rest of my team, with the customer, with the principal that doesn't really understand that much CAD, right? And what is the best way to convey all that information is probably going to be through an application that does real-time visualization. So just a couple of things. I'm moving around the surface, and as you can see, once I move this into 40 centimeters bigger, the whole thing updates. That means that at any time I get some feedback, something has to be different, we just do it differently and we don't lose work. So now back to Marian.
So let's have a look here at how we can create a really nice presentation using Showcase, which is a real-time presentation. So here in Showcase, I'm going to import directly the DWG file. So you see here, I'm clicking on the DWG file, and I'm going to file link it, almost file link it or XREF it to Showcase. So as the model progresses, I will be able to update the DWG file and receive these upgrades as well. So you see here, I have the DWG directly in Showcase. So first thing you'll probably want to do is add some environments. So place this building in a certain environment so it can look like it lives somewhere. So there's different options here that you have for environments. So you can just pick and choose the one that please you. And the second thing I'll do is I'll add this ground object to have shadow so the model lives somewhere and it looks like it belongs. Now the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the material, because although the AutoCAD material are being recognized in Showcase, you might want to change the material and try different material on your objects. I'm going to select all the objects that do have the material that were applied in AutoCAD and just change them to different Showcase materials. So you have paints material, you have glass material, metal material, a wide variety of material are available to you directly in Showcase. Now that I have different material here, one thing that is very nice in Showcase and really easy to do is create material alternative, which will allow you to experience this building or this design in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and create my first alternative and apply different material to my model and create a second alternative, which I can basically go back and forth in between these two alternatives and experience my design with two different sets of material. So now I have my second alternative load here, and you can see that I can go back and forth in between these two alternatives. So this is really nice for presentation purposes, where you can present your model in different ways using different material sets. Now the second thing you want to do is probably create some animation. So have some presets, kind of like movements that move this model around for your presentation. So here I have different shots that I have previously created using this design. And you can see that my model is being presented with all these different camera animation that goes around the building. So very easy to do in Showcase, and I'll show you how. So basically what you want to do is create a cinematic. So I'm going to go ahead and create a cinematic here. So name this shot temporary. Now there's a lot of options available here to you, and you can explore and create the one that you like. The one that I like is to set my start point and set my end points. So you can create maybe a 3 seconds little quick animation here and preview it. So very quickly here I was able to create a quick cinematic, and I can have a variety of these animation that I can view using the two different material alternatives. So very, very quick and efficient in Showcase. I can experience this model in a real-time environments. Now I'm going to just hide this model for a quick second and unhide these two models that I had previously loaded. And you'll see that on top of having material alternative, I was also able to create model alternatives. So here I have two models on top of each other, which have material alternatives. So I can basically experience, so you see the first design has got a more round window, the other one is more pointy, so I can experience very different model with different material on it. So, the options in Showcase are quite wide. So here I'm going to create a storyboard in Showcase, which basically will use all of these alternatives that I have created. The storyboard will allow you to do a full presentation that is kind of pre-baked if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and load some different material alternative. So my slide here is about 3 seconds, and in that 3 seconds, I will have both material alternative that are going to be showing. It's going to be showing as well both model alternative. So basically, in that 3 seconds, a lot of things will be happening. I'm going to load as well an environment. So you can decide which environment is being presented. And I'm going to load a shot. Now, this is all happening in Showcase, but you will be happy to know that you can also present this using a Flash movie or HTML presentation. So now I have this full storyboard that I have created that is no longer showing in Showcase. This is directly in Explorer. So you can basically send this presentation to your clients, or you can present it on a laptop that doesn't have Showcase installed. So, and here you can see I have all my storyboard slide that I have previously created that I have access, even though it's an HTML presentation or a Flash movie if you want. You can also export that as an AVI movie. There's different ways to present this final presentation. So very versatile to do real-time presentation. Showcase will be very useful to experience your design at the early stage.
And of course, any change like the one on the curtain wall can be very fast done in AutoCAD and then just update the model in Showcase, which is what the imported settings are about. But now we have to go in a second stage because we had that conceptual design working and it's pretty fine, but we need to get more closer to a real building. So the first thing that Marion will ask me now is, okay, I want to do some lighting analysis, so I need some better idea what's happening on the building. And of course, there's a lot of curtain walls, so there's a lot of lights there. So I'll create some shades, there's some shaders, and in this case, I just made an offset of the curtain wall and created some lines, and I'm going to project those lines against the surface, so I have the path for making a sweep. So in this case, what I need to do is I change the UCS, so the Z is going directly from the polylines into the surfaces, and then I just use project UCS into that surface, and voila, I have my paths there onto the surface. And now the only thing I need to do is to create a sweep of a profile. The profile could be something that we are just going to draw now, like a rectangle. It's what I'm going to do now. But you could even be bringing a real profile from Seek, for example, and get that profile. Just click on that profile and choose the path. So as you can see now, I'm just creating it from scratch because it's going to be a simple rectangle. It could be wood, for example. So I'm basically going to go and do the sweep. I can do the sweeps both as a surface or as a solid, but in this case, I want it to solid because I need to be capped. So I create first, I get the profile, and then I just get the path. And as you can see, probably that's not the direction I want. So after I make it, since again it remembers how it was done, I can, for example, make a profile rotation 90 degrees or 20 degrees or whatever I want. And the most interesting thing about this is that I could even send a couple of options to Marion in which, okay, maybe a certain degree of angle or inclination there will bring more or less light into the interior. So now Marion is going to show how to work with lighting analysis.
Yeah, so once the lighting analysis will be created using 3ds Max Design. And one of the really powerful things about 3ds Max Design is that you can file link your DWG drawing directly in 3ds Max Design. So here you see I have the DWG that has been file linked. So this is the model that I have from AutoCAD. So I'm going to just adjust the exposure control. And the reason why I'm showing this step is because it's often forgotten. So I adjust your exposure control so you have the direct exposure, the right exposure for your light analysis when you're going to create the rendering. So the other thing that is very great here that you can see is that you can have direct feedback in your viewports of this sun and shadow that was imported from AutoCAD. So here I am turning on the hardware shading as well as the viewport background to experience this shadow directly in my viewport. So you see here I have the sky, I have the shadow, I can understand what's going on. And if I select my sun and start changing the time of the day, you'll see that this shadow will be moving. Now the building, it's on its own, but if the building would be in a city, I can understand how the building are affecting my design and where the shadow are landing at a specific time of the day. Now when you do light analysis, you'll probably want to use a weather data file which has analyzed light intensity. So that's what I'm going to do here. So you see my shadow is moving. This is almost like a shadow analysis directly in my viewports. So let's load a weather data file that I have here. So it's an EPW file. And this has pre-recorded sun light intensity. So I'm going to tune it to June 21st. And I'm going to do my light analysis on the span of a day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I'm just adjusting my time here. And I'm going to also match the timeline, so the animation of my time of the day. So once I have picked my time, which is 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., I'm going to match the time. You see I have all the keyframes that match the specific time of the day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm also going to display the sun trajectory, so I'll have kind of a visual reference of the sun path directly in my scene. So now if I move the cursor animation, I have the shadow that is being displayed at every time of the day. So let's move inside of my pavilion where I'll perform the light analysis. So you see here I can move the shadow, and I have direct feedback as well here. So I'm going to turn off the hardware shading, which will come, it doesn't, when you have hardware shading and you have a light metering object when you perform your light analysis, it kind of interfere and it would display this light metering object as a shadow object. So you need to go back to a regular shaded view to perform your light analysis and have direct feedback in your viewports. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my regular shaded view and use the default lights to display in my viewports. So now that I have that, I'm going to use the help of the light analysis assistant to make sure that my scene is ready for the light analysis, make sure that I have the perfect lights, the great material. So you'll see that if you would have something missing, it would display in here. And I'm going to create a light meter, use the auto grid to make sure that I'm snapping to my floor, and create a light meter object directly on my floor. I'm going to adjust it to the perfect length and width to cover a good superficie of my floor, and I'm going to raise it, so I'm going to turn it a bit. Now you can create one or multiple light metering objects to match the size of your floor. I'm going to raise it to a decent height where I can perform the light analysis, and I'm going to go ahead and calculate this light meter object. So now it's going to calculate the light value, the intensity of the light that I have in my pavilion at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And now it displays in gradients of color as well as lux value directly in my viewport. Now you can always export this the light number, the lux number, into a CSV file and perform further analysis of your results. Now the thing that is really good here is I'm using a file link workflow. Therefore, I can load multiple variation of this louver that Guillermo just designed for me by loading a different option. So here I would have a different option that I could kind of load and perform a very quick light analysis and kind of validate these different louver option that I have for my design. So light analysis with file linking is very powerful and very quick. You can have good validation of your design and make sure that you're designing something that is appropriate for your space. Now, the other thing that is very good is that you can also create a light analysis image overlay to present this light analysis in a rendering mode if you want for your presentation. So here you see that the gradients of color have changed is because I can change the minimum and maximum lux value of this gradient of color that's being presented. So depending on how you want to highlight certain areas of your light metering object. So there you go. So here I have a render of my image overlay, and you can see here this option is showing an image overlay on the entire image. So the number, the lux value image are presented on the entire image. But you can also present showing the number from the light metering object like you have in your viewport, and this would be the results that you have here. So obviously for this image, I have created different light meter to cover the full space of my pavilion.
But the end goal is to have that amazing hyperreal image, so we need more details, and we have more details in AutoCAD right now. So instead of just going and doing more and more modeling, I really want to focus on some best practices of when or how to use solids and surfaces in AutoCAD, which will help you to understand how to work with these things. For example, if you have a surface like this one, there's a command on the solid tab called thicken that has been around for a couple of years, in which you can basically, as you can see, just create very fast the thickness on your slab. It can make it positive or negative depending on the direction you want to go, as you can see now. But that's not the only way to create the thicknesses, right? There's another way, which is through offset. Offset is in the surface tab, and in this case, you can flip the direction so you know exactly where you're going through, and choose solid, and from there, just add the right number. So I just want to make sure you understand that there are different options, different possibilities. The nice thing about doing it from surfaces is that you still have some level of associativity. This is a different case. In this case, I'm making an offset of the roof, and let's say I want to extend one of the surfaces, so it's not exactly a thicken operation in which it's just thickening through the parallel, right? It's really something that has two different surfaces. So I want to extend one of the edges because I want it a little longer, This is what I'm doing with the extend command on surfaces. I'm getting the feedback exactly of what's happening and where I'm going with the surface. So right now I have one surface slightly longer than the other one. So thicken here would not work. Offset with solid here would not work. What am I doing now? I am creating lofts, right, between those two surfaces, making sure the loft is G0 in both sides. That means that the angle between surfaces is straight, right? There's no curvature there. And once I finish with this, I'll be able to create a solid from a set of watertight surfaces. In this case, I have a little challenge here because on the loft is finding two segments on the upper side. So I can select, join multiple segments and do exactly what I have just done and go to the last edge and finish the operation with something very similar. I'm going to select one edge on the bottom, and you have to click Control when you do this because you want to select the edge of an existing surface, and then go to join multiple edges and get this loft. So once you have all this done, and as you can see, at any time if I select the loft, I get what we call the explicit surface, which means the surface knows it's a loft, so it keeps all the properties. It's not a NURB surface. So now I'm just going to basically be sculpting this object. Before, I just want to check out some little details, if everything is ruled or has exactly G0. And then I'm going to sculpt. And there's a command for sculpting surfaces on the Edit panel in the Surface tab. And again, just very simple. I have a solid. And what is the nice thing about having solids is that you can perform Boolean operations. You can have much more things to do with a solid. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about NURB surfaces, because I've been saying, yeah, you can do associativity with explicit surfaces. They're great, but we have NURB surfaces. And why would we have explicit and NURB surfaces at the same time? Because some operations are better with NURB surfaces. If you're doing something that creates some level of singularity within a surface, then there is no method that explains that procedure, right? So it's not an extrusion, it's not a revolution, it's something different. It's just tweaking these contour vertices, for example, and just making a bump, right? There's no way to create that with an explicit surface. So the nice thing is that we can convert any surface into a NURB surface. We can rebuild. We can add more detail, for example, in this case, adding more contour vertices, and just edit, move around in a very simple way. If you're used, for example, in the way 3ds Max deals with edges and vertices, it's pretty similar too. So there's a lot of familiarity. If you learn something in one application, you don't have to learn it again in a different one. And you can get this level of let's say, flexibility and freedom in a very fast way, right? So my suggestion is keep explicit surfaces as much as you can, but if you really need to have some singularity, just move to NURB surfaces. One other thing very interesting about NURB surfaces is what you can do with what we call the CV edit bar. Because in the other case, we were just tweaking the hull, which are all those points that you can see now. But we can add more detail to the hull. We can add a row of CVs at any direction. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to track any point, which may not be any of the particular points of the hull. I can track that point. I can align the gizmo, the controller, with the normal to the surface, which in a box it's very easy. I can tweak UCS. But in a surface like this, it's very difficult. So as you can see, I could do it very fast, very productive at just showing and producing singularities like this in the surface. So I can get the best of both worlds. I can use explicit surfaces when I know the method, and I can use NURB surfaces when I just want to create pretty much anything. So assuming I already made the rest of the model, there goes Marion with the last stage on Max.
All right, so let's have a look on how we can create a visualization here in 3ds Max Design. So basically, we will start from the DWG drawing that will file link to 3ds Max Design. And we'll start from the very basic look of AutoCAD, if you want, with the basic or 3D DWG drawing, all the way to a more final and more refined photorealistic imagery that we can create using 3ds Max Design. So the first thing and you see here like some images where we're aiming to, with 3ds Max Design, with all the elements that you can add and really create and experiment this design before it's being built, and really puts this model in a context so it's just not standing there by itself. So let's just have a look here at AutoCAD. So basically, when you are doing the file linking, every time that you are saving your DWG drawing in AutoCAD, you're going to receive an indication in 3ds Max Design, like what you need to update your DW drawing. So here I just saved my DW drawing in AutoCAD, which is the final design. And in 3ds Max Design, I'm going to open up the file linking reference window, and you'll see that there's a red flag indicating that my design needs to be updated. So I'm just going to go ahead and reload this DW drawing, and I'll receive all the final tweak that's been applied to this design. So first thing is you'll need to readjust the camera, because the camera is being read a little bit different in 3ds Max Design. So you just need to readjust the lens of the camera, and now you're back to where you were in AutoCAD. I'm also going to display the material to have a better experience directly in the viewport where I can understand what's going on. So let's just go ahead and do a quick rendering. And before, you will have to adjust the exposure control like we saw earlier. And I'm just going to adjust the intensity of it here so it's a little bit brighter. And I'm going to go ahead and click render. And basically, I have everything that was imported from AutoCAD. Now, the rendering process is quite fast here because I have adjusted the global quality knobs of this image to be a quicker rendering. Now, as the model will progress, I will fine-tune this image precision to have a more refined image when I'm close to the end of my design. So here you have the direct import from AutoCAD, which is the first DW drawing. I'm just going to clone this image, and I'm going to start to create some iteration on this model and experience this model a little bit different. So like you saw in Showcase, I was able to create some model alternative. There's something similar in Max called scene state. So I'm going to go ahead and save all the material that are right there, which are the original material that are coming from AutoCAD. And I'm going to start changing these materials. So I'm going to load them in my material editor. So you'll recognize the same presets of the material that are the Autodesk materials. And they're exactly the same in 3ds Max Design. So you won't need to relearn how to deal with the material once you're in Max. So I'm going to load a few of these material in my material editor. And I'm going to go ahead and start change them. So I'm going to call the material and map browser and select a different material. So you'll recognize the Autodesk material library categories. So they're exactly categorized the same way in 3ds Max Design. So you won't be lost. All the same material are available here. So let's just pick a metal, for example. And something that is good to know that, is that in 3ds Max Design, you have access to a wide range of materials, including the architecture and design material, which are also physically accurate materials that you can use in 3ds Max Design. So here I have applied this rusted metal, but it's not giving me the real feedback in the viewport. So let's just render these objects. I'm going to select all these objects that have this material, and instead of re-rendering the complete image, I'm going to render only the selected objects. So this is very quick to do and very easy to do in 3ds Max Design, and you'll see that I'm saving quite a bit of time, and it's giving me great feedback in the rendering. So see, it's rendering only the objects that have the metal. So I can clone this image again and use it later on for comparison. So let's change another material. So let's change this wood and apply a very bright, glossy red paint for now, just for the purpose of this example. So it's a little bit flashy. So directly in the viewport, you have feedback. And then again, what you can do here is to render a region. So I'm going to focus on the louvers here and see how this glossy material is affecting the louvers. So either using render region or selected area or selected objects is very quick to do in Max, and it saves you rendering time. So here I was able to create 3 different variations of my design using the reveal rendering window, and I can save these images and present them to my clients very quickly or email them. So now that I have a different material alternative, I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call this one Red Scene, and I'm going to go back to my original material. So this is kind of how we deal with material alternative in 3ds Max Design. Now, the other good thing that you'll be happy to know is that layers are respected in 3ds Max Design. So, and you deal with it the same way that you do in AutoCAD by hiding and freezing the layer, as well as one additional option that is available in Max is that the fact that you can choose which layer to render or not render if you want. The other way, though, that you will use layer in 3ds Max Design is sometimes to enhance your visualization. Like here, I have developed different mullions for this sky dome, and I can either hide or show different variation of this mullion and create different renders if I want. So this is also another way to deal with layers in 3ds Max Design. So let's go ahead and, I'm going to unhide this layer where I have extra content that I added on my model already. And you can unhide or hide these layers if you want to display extra content on your scene. So I'm going to go ahead and create an extra layer, and I'm going to call this one tree, and I'm going to import some different content. So the checkbox here next to the layer indicates which layer is active. Now you can import or merge different content in 3ds Max Design, and this content can come from various sources. And one of the good ones that I really like and use a lot is Google 3D Warehouse, Google 3D Warehouse website, which has a lot of, it's huge. This model gallery is very big, and it's got all these SketchUp models that you can now import directly in 3ds Max Design. Another one is the Autodesk Seek website, where you have a wide gallery of trees that are available in their max scene. So when you are merging a max scene, you'll see I have downloaded some trees here. And because they're max scene, you can drag and drop them directly in max and just choose the merge option, and this will merge the tree directly in your scene. So you see the tree here, so I'm going to isolate the tree so I can focus on it. And the reason why it's black right now, it's because Max doesn't know where the textures are. So I'm going to go and call the assets tracking window. I'm going to do a quick refresh. So you see the textures are here, but Max doesn't know where these textures are. So I'm going to just reset my path and point to the image folder where these images are. So now the images are being recognized by Max, and you can see that they're being displayed directly in the viewport. Now, adding trees into your model will add extra weight because this tree has quite a bit of polygon on it. And one good way to deal with extra weight or extra polygon is by transforming this tree into a mental ray proxy, would help you manage content in your scene. So I'm going to create the mental ray proxy icon and point it to the tree here. So I'm going to say this is the tree, and basically write this object a file, which will create a .mib file, which will reference it when I render. So basically, it's creating a small thumbnail so I can recognize what this tree is, and it's giving me verts icons here. So now that I have the mental ray proxy, I can get rid of the polygon tree, and basically I'm going to place this mental ray proxy in my scene, and now I don't have the weight of the extra polygon in my scene. So my scene is very easy. I can toggle and orbit around, and it's not heavy, but when I'm going to render, and it's going to load the .mib file and render the tree image with the shadow and everything. Now the other way to add content to your scene is by using the object paint, and this is a really good way to do. You can paint object or you can paint mental ray proxy. So here on the extra layer that I have these models that were created. They're basically characters that were created using AutoCAD blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and expand the graphite modeling tools, and I'm going to use the object paint here. And I'm going to load all of these characters and add them to my selection. So those are all the models I'm going to be painting with. And I'm going to paint on the selected objects, which is the ground, which is the pavement, which is around my pavilion. And I'm going to choose to paint these, all of these objects in a random manner. And now I'm going to click, and everywhere I paint, you'll see that these characters are being added on my pavements. Now I can adjust the setting of my brush stroke by adding more or less, or scattering these objects, rotating them. I can also scale them. Now you can use object paint to add clusters of trees very easily, even if your terrain is all like different X, Y, Z location. So the object paint will be very, very useful to very quickly add content on a random matter on an object or all over your scene. Now the other thing we're going to do here is start to create some different camera and maybe a camera animation. So I'm going to go from a perspective view and adjust somewhat an angle that I like and create a camera from this view. So this is the way I like to do it. And from here you see that it's created this extra camera, which is a target camera. So when you do an animation, you can animate both the target and the camera. So I'm going to position the target in the middle of my building. I'm going to filter my selection to easily be able to select this target in the middle of my building and reposition it. Now, when I go to the camera view itself, I can also adjust the height of this target. So basically, the target is where the camera is looking at. Now, I'm going to turn on the auto key and add a keyframe on this target, as well as the camera for my first keyframe. Move my cursor at frame 150, and pick my final angle for the final frame of my animation. So I can just adjust this. And because I have the auto key pressed on, 3ds Max Design is recording all of these actions and automatically adding a keyframe. So you see that I can play this animation now, and whatever action I am changing or whatever movement I'm changing into my camera is being automatically recorded. So here I'm adding a tilt to be a little bit more creative with my camera animation and maybe add some creativity or flow. And now I have my full camera animation done. So once I'm done with the animation, don't forget to unpress the auto key. So it's going to stop the recording action. So let's have a look here at different cameras that I have applied into this final scene here. So you see I have quite a bit of things here. And you'll notice that some of these rendering are using depth of field. So it's helping me focus on the building and adding depth to my cameras. And also you'll notice that there's quite a bit of content that's been added around this pavilion to help place it in context. So there's building in the background, there's quite a bit of trees, there's people, there's cars. So all of these objects help me add realism to my scene and also adds contents and place in a position. So here's a final animation, and you'll see that I've used P-Flow to create these waterfall. My water is moving. So 3ds Max Design is a very powerful software where you can create photorealistic animation, high quality rendering, and really experience and visualize this building before it's being built, and try different variation with your model, different angle, view this building and very understand what is going on in the context of the building itself. So once I'm done with this animation, I can render some quick rendering and pass it over to Alias Sketch to create some photo montage. So we'll review that with Guillermo.
And that is basically the last step that we're going to do now, because what we want to do is, okay, we have the rendering, we had the first photograph, the aerial photograph we started with, and what we want to do now is get both together. So what I'm getting now from Marion is the render with an alpha channel for the background. So what I'm doing now is just bringing back the photograph that you remember from the first part of our presentation. I'm going to import an image into a new layer, and I'm bringing the rendering that Marion gave me. So now just making a photo montage, making a 2D compositing in Sketchbook Designer for AutoCAD. Remember, this is still AutoCAD, right, with the plugin Sketchbook Designer, Alias Sketch. And I'm just applying transforms very easily. In this case, just tweaking the scale. But I can be even more creative with the tweaking. Sometimes I need some very basic tweakings on some places. And there's another tool within the transform called Warp, which is the third one here. And that one allows the boundary to become some sort of spline. So I can just move around and just make very fine tweakings on the image. And once we have that done, it's pretty much ready. The only thing I want to do now, just to show you another thing, is what happens if I need, for example, extra cars. I really don't want Marion to render more cars in the scene, right? So I'll just create a selection within her render, right? In this case, a polygonal selection could have been a lasso. You'll see that many of the options here are very familiar with anybody doing image editing software. And now I will basically refine the selection a little bit with the lasso tool, and then by simply duplicating or copying that information, right, into the clipboard and then pasting it, I create a new layer that only has that car because it's part of the selection in that layer. And then using transforms, I just can move it there and can add 1, 2, 3, 20, whatever I want. And within AutoCAD, within my presentation, my sheet, or whatever I already have done, I got the chance to create the 2D compositing and finish the whole workflow, which is basically what we just wanted to show. How we can start making initial sketchings, use that information in AutoCAD, do the modeling, do design validation with showcase and presentation, go back to AutoCAD, do some further modeling and light analysis and rendering in 3ds Max, and end up doing compositing in Alias Sketch for AutoCAD, all within the same products from the Autodesk Design Suite. So thank you very much for your attention, and we're glad that this could be helpful for you guys.